I was 25 and running out of breath long before the fireworks began. That 4th of July. I told myself the dizziness was stress, the tight chest, a tantrum of nerves. I heard my father's voice in my head be useful. Stop making scenes until the room tilted and the edges of people blurred like a watercolor left in the rain. I gripped the sink, saw my lips dusky blue in the mirror, and understood with electric clarity that I could not take a full breath. When I staggered back to the kitchen, my family was debating pie flavors. I was debating whether my lungs would hold until help arrived. My name is Abigail Marshall, raised in a house where weakness was a rumor you stamped out before it spread. My father, Frank, built his construction crews on schedules and certainty, and tried to build his daughters the same way. I learned early that pain cost you credibility. When I broke my wrist at 7, I washed a sink of plates before urgent care. When migraines flattened me at 13, I was told to push through the drama until an infection proved I wasn't auditioning for sympathy. Mom had been the soft place in the house, but she died when I was 4. And after that, the rules hardened like cement. Dad's sister, Aunt Martha, kept up a parade of comments with a smile's sharp edge. Only my younger sister, Jessica, quiet, watchful, stubbornly kind, sat with me in the dark when the light hurt and believed me when I said it did. College had been my jailbreak. In a dorm 300 miles away, professors granted extensions when I was genuinely sick. Roommates dimmed the lights on migraine days, and no one demanded I justify my own nervous system. Then the economy coughed. My marketing firm lost 3 anchor clients, and the city's rent bared its teeth. 3 months later, savings gone and pride bruised. I accepted Dad's offer of the apartment above his garage until you're on your feet. Jessica, now a nurse at the local hospital, hugged me like I was a person and not a provisional employee of the family. Even Aunt Martha mentioned opportunities at her country club. I reminded myself it was temporary, like a storm shelter, and practiced breathing in the old air. The family's 4th of July barbecue was a martial ritual, lawn chairs facing the park, a grill smoking like a signal fire, a kitchen turned assembly line. This year, with my return, Dad announced I would pull my weight by hosting, a task that used to be Mom's, and then an annual fuss under Martha's supervision. I scrubbed and planned and priced groceries with the zeal of a woman negotiating for permission to exist. The first odd fatigue arrived 3 days before, a heaviness that sat on my shoulders even after a full night's sleep. Stairs stole my wind. A dull ache lit in my right calf. I told myself I was out of shape and kept vacuuming. That night, my best friend from college, Elaine, warned me over the phone not to turn back into the girl who ignored her body to appease her father's doubts. I promised to rest and stayed up until midnight prepping salads. By the morning of July 3rd, sharp pains snuck into my chest when I inhaled. I wrapped my calf, swallowed over-the-counter pills, and reassured myself with the false authority of denial. The 4th dawned hot and showy, and my lungs felt like they were practicing a smaller life. I strung streamers. I set 16 places. At noon, Jessica arrived, saw my face, and frowned. I said I was fine and asked her to help with the coolers, when a sudden spike of pain lanced my chest. I pretended it was a pulled muscle and carried on. By 2 p.m., family flowed into the backyard like a tide of familiar expectations. Aunt Martha clocked the decorations with a raised brow and told me to put some color in my cheeks so I wouldn't bring down the mood. I laughed, because if I didn't, I might cry, and tears were a language banned in our house. Breathing became a job I had to concentrate on. Conversation moved around me in bright threads while mine frayed. Dad noticed I wasn't eating and muttered that after all the money he'd spent, I could at least finish a plate. I lifted a fork like it weighed a stone. A stab of pain drove a gasp out of me during dessert, and a few heads turned. I smiled to stitch the moment closed and excused myself to the bathroom, where the mirror returned a face I didn't recognize, chalk pale. Lips washed in blue, eyes wide with a fear I could no longer shame into silence. I splashed water, whispered, "Get it together," and discovered there are moments when the body refuses to bargain. Crossing the kitchen felt like climbing a hill I couldn't see. I reached the counter. The lights went too bright, then too dim, and a stack of plates slipped from my hands, exploding on the tile like a warning blown to shards. Dad barreled in at the sound, fury moving before concern. "Those were your mother's plates." I opened my mouth and found only air that wouldn't go deep enough. "I can't breathe," I said, the words thin and torn. He rolled his eyes, as if my lungs were staging a protest instead of a failure. "Quit faking it. Clean this up." Martha arrived to tally the damage and tutted that I had always tried to escape cleanup duty. Jessica's voice cut the room like a bell, urgent and loud in a way I had never heard from her. "She is not faking. Look at her." My vision narrowed. I knocked another glass to the floor, trying to steady myself. My knees gave, the tiles were cold, and the world began to funnel. Uncle Robert hovered, suggesting we call someone. Dad said I needed to calm down, but even his voice had lost its certainty. The ceiling swung like a pendulum as I slid to the floor among the shards. My grandmother's command. "Give her space," organized the chaos for a breath or two. Jessica was already dialing, listing my age, the symptoms, the frightening blue of my lips. The sirens came like a promise I wasn't sure the world intended to keep. Boots in the doorway, uniforms, a young EMT kneeling, his fingers at my wrist, his face changing in an instant. "Stretcher now," he said. "Pulse 140, oxygen sats critically low." My father's color washed out as if someone had pulled a plug. My sister took my hand. The mask pressed to my face tasted like plastic and relief. The kitchen doors opened to daylight. The house I grew up in watched me go. The siren wailed above me, a steady cry that blurred with my own ragged breaths. The ambulance ceiling rushed past, bright lights bouncing off chrome rails. The oxygen mask sealed my face, each inhale still shallow but a fraction easier. A voice above me rattled numbers that sounded like a death sentence disguised as data: blood pressure 70/40, heart racing, oxygen falling. Jessica's hand squeezed mine, the one thing that anchored me. "Hang on, Abby," she whispered. I wanted to nod, but my body was busy doing the bare minimum, fighting for another breath. The ER swallowed me in a blur of fluorescent light and urgent hands. Doctors and nurses spoke in a language I only half understood: pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, critical condition, cold gel smeared on my leg, an ultrasound wand confirming the clot. I was wheeled under a looming CT scanner, the machine buzzing as if it were photographing the truth my family had spent years denying. Back in the trauma bay, a doctor leaned over me, calm but urgent. "We're going to help you breathe," she said, and darkness took me like a mercy. I missed the next 12 hours. Jessica later told me I was intubated, tubes snaked into veins, blood thinners flooding my system, a catheter guided to the clot threatening my lungs. She never left the waiting room, curled in a chair while my father paced in silence. Aunt Martha fled early, complaining of the stress. My grandmother stayed with knitting needles clicking like a metronome of faith. My Uncle Robert bought vending machine coffee and made sure Dad ate something, though guilt seemed to have hollowed him more than hunger. When I woke, my throat raw from the tube, Jessica was beside me, her hand still holding mine like she'd been afraid to let go. Relief washed her face when I whispered a raspy, "What happened?" The doctor explained in clear, unflinching terms. A clot had formed in my leg, broken loose, lodged in my lungs. Without treatment, I would have been dead within hours. Fatal, she said, the word heavy as stone. I listened, half dazed, half stunned by the simple fact that they had believed me here. In this hospital, no one accused me of drama or attention-seeking. They treated my pain as real, my life as valuable. That validation was almost as powerful as the oxygen filling my lungs. The next day, the reality settled like a second weight, months of blood thinners, checkups, a body that would need rebuilding. My father visited, standing awkwardly by the bed, his voice rough when he finally said, "I'm glad you're all right." It wasn't an apology. He filled the silence with small talk about the weather and hospital food until he excused himself. I watched him leave, wondering if he would ever admit how close his disbelief had come to killing me. Dr. Winters, my physician, suggested a family meeting before discharge. She wanted them to understand the seriousness of pulmonary embolism and the danger of dismissing symptoms. They gathered in my room, Dad, Jessica, Grandmother, Uncle Robert, and even Aunt Martha. The doctor laid out the facts, her tone professional but edged with quiet rebuke. Without immediate treatment, she said, Abigail would not have survived. Believing her when she said she could not breathe could have made the difference between life and death. The words cracked something open in me. For years I had swallowed the hurt, accepted the label of drama queen. But in that hospital bed, with evidence and witnesses, I finally spoke. I told you I couldn't breathe. You said I was faking. My whole life you've told me I exaggerate. You taught me to doubt myself, and it almost killed me. The silence was heavy, broken only when Aunt Martha started with her usual tone. Now, Abigail? No one could have known I cut her off. Louder than I'd ever dared. I nearly died. And you're still making excuses. She flushed, sputtered, and left the room, the door slamming behind her. Dad sat rigid, anger and shame warring across his face. "We're not mind readers," he muttered. How were we supposed to know this time was different? My voice shook but held. You weren't supposed to know? You were supposed to believe me. For the first time, Grandmother spoke, her voice sharp despite age. She's right. Frank, we failed her. Jessica pulled out a small notebook she'd kept for years, documenting every time I had been dismissed migraines, infections, fevers, injuries waved away until they became undeniable. Uncle Robert looked stricken, realizing the pattern. Dad stood, staring out the window, silent until finally saying, "I thought I was teaching you to be strong. I didn't realize I was teaching you. Your feelings didn't matter." Then he walked out, leaving the rest of us in uneasy quiet. Something shifted in that moment. I had said the words I'd carried for decades, and some of them had heard me. Not all, maybe never all, but enough. For the first time, I felt lighter. The truth had been spoken, and it was no longer just mine to carry. Recovery was slower than I imagined. Each day, I measured progress in inches, not miles, walking the hallway without stopping, breathing deep without pain, trusting my body after years of doubting it. Nurses reminded me often that pain was not weakness, that reporting symptoms wasn't complaining. Their words echoed louder than my father's old lessons, rewiring something fundamental inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to listen when my body whispered warnings instead of waiting until it screamed. When I was discharged, Jessica drove me back to Dad's house. The apartment above the garage felt different now, smaller, tighter, full of echoes from the night I nearly collapsed on its kitchen floor. Dad hovered awkwardly, offering help I didn't want. He left envelopes with money on the table, texted short questions about my health, but avoided any direct acknowledgement of the pain his disbelief had caused. Aunt Martha didn't call at all. The silence was its own answer. Jessica became my lifeline, checking my meds, driving me to follow up appointments, reminding me to rest when guilt tried to push me into overdoing. Elaine, my best friend from college, visited often, bringing laughter and a fierce protectiveness that contrasted sharply with my family's years of dismissal. "They could have killed you with their denial," she said bluntly, anger simmering in her voice. Her belief in me was steady, something I clung to while my body healed. 2 months later, Jessica surprised me by moving in with me. She'd transferred to a hospital in the city and claimed the second bedroom in the small walk-up Elaine and I had found. Life began to rebuild in quiet ways, morning sunlight spilling across a kitchen counter. Late-night talks with Jessica about the past we were determined not to repeat. The relief of work I could manage from home as a virtual marketing assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed me to heal without the crushing weight of expectation. My relationship with my father shifted into uneasy truce. He called sometimes, mostly to ask practical questions. Did I need groceries? Was the job stable? How was Jessica settling in? One afternoon, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked older, shoulders bent under more than age. He picked up an apple, turned it over in his hands, then set it back down. "I was wrong," he said finally. "Not just about that night, about a lot of things. I thought I was teaching you to be strong. I didn't see I was teaching you to doubt yourself." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more than I had ever expected. "I'm still angry," I told him honestly, "and I might be for a long time." He nodded, accepting it. "Maybe dinner sometime. You and Jessica both. When you're ready." I left with cautious hope. A door cracked open, but not yet stepped through. The cycle broke one night when Jessica doubled over in pain, clutching her stomach. Fear jolted me awake, but instead of second-guessing, I grabbed my keys and drove her to the ER. It was appendicitis, caught early enough to avoid rupture. As I sat by her hospital bed, I realized the chain of disbelief that had nearly killed me would end with us. We would not dismiss each other. We would not wait until symptoms became undeniable. We would believe first, act first, love first. Even Aunt Martha surprised me months later with a phone call. Her voice was subdued, stripped of its usual sharpness. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said. "She suggested I reach out. I said terrible things to you. For years. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say, so I simply thanked her." Before we hung up, she said something that stuck like a seed planted in soil I hadn't known was waiting. "Your mother would have believed you. Always." The words broke something open in me. Grief and comfort tangled. I barely remembered my mother, but I could hold on to that image of her as my advocate, even in absence. Life slowly settled into rhythm therapy sessions, cautious exercise, morning walks where I relearned how to trust my lungs, The fear of another embolism lingered, but it softened as each clear scan passed, as each pain-free breath stitched a new layer of confidence. My voice, once quieted by dismissal, grew steady. When I heard a stranger in a cafe dismiss her friend's symptoms as just anxiety, I leaned over and told her my story, urging her to get checked. She looked at me with recognition, relief, and maybe even gratitude. Passing that lesson forward felt like reclaiming every moment I had been silenced. Looking back, I realized the embolism had nearly killed me, but it had also forced a reckoning. It tore away the last veil of denial and showed me what I could survive. I had found my voice in the wreckage, and I would not let anyone take it again. My story became proof that even when you've been doubted your whole life, you can still learn to trust yourself, and in trusting yourself, you find freedom. Autumn arrived with cooler air and the kind of golden light that makes everything look softer, even the scars of summer. I was 2 months out from the embolism, and life had found its way into steadier patterns. Therapy helped me untangle years of conditioning, reminding me that trusting my body wasn't selfish, but necessary. Jessica and I turned our little apartment into a place of safety, where pain was never minimized, where even small aches earned compassion instead of suspicion. For the first time in years, home felt like home. Dad reached out more often, cautious in his words, but present in ways I'd never seen before. He never offered a full apology. But when I mentioned headaches or fatigue, he no longer brushed it aside. It was clumsy progress, like watching a man try to speak a language he had spent decades refusing to learn. Aunt Martha's apology call lingered in my mind, especially her mention of my mother's fierce advocacy. That image reshaped something inside me. Maybe part of Mom had always been in me, the part that refused to stay silent, the part that finally demanded belief. I began to notice how many people carried stories like mine. A coworker once confided about years of stomach pain her family dismissed until it became an ulcer. At the coffee shop, a stranger whispered about panic attacks her parents called dramatics. I found myself gently telling them what I had learned: trust yourself, insist on being heard, and if one person won't listen, find another who will. Each time I shared, I felt stronger, as though speaking it aloud wove the pain into something purposeful. The biggest shift, though, was within me. I stopped second-guessing every signal from my body. When my chest tightened or a migraine brewed, I acknowledged it without shame. I made doctor's appointments without rehearsing excuses. I no longer needed to prove my suffering for it to be valid. That was freedom I had never known, and it carried me through each day with a steadier heartbeat. Jessica and I often talked late into the night about how the cycle had ended with us. "We'll never make anyone doubt themselves the way we were made to," she said once, her voice firm. I believed her. We were building something new, brick by brick, with trust as our foundation. Even Dad's tentative steps toward change couldn't erase the years of hurt, but they didn't define me anymore. I had survived what disbelief could do, and I had chosen to live differently. One evening in early winter, I walked home beneath a sky pricked with stars, breathing deeply, freely. I thought of that 4th of July kitchen floor, the shards of broken plates, the oxygen mask, the terror in Jessica's eyes, and I thought of the hospital bed where I'd finally spoken the truth out loud. Those memories would always live inside me, but they no longer owned me. They had become part of the story I carried forward, A story of survival, of reclaiming trust in myself, of learning that belief can save a life. So I ask you, if you've ever had your pain dismissed, if you've ever been told you were exaggerating, dramatic, or weak, listen to yourself anyway. Your body knows, and your voice deserves to be heard. Share your story, because someone else may need it to find the courage to trust their own. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are never alone. Leave a comment below. I want to hear your experiences and how you found the strength to trust yourself. Together, our voices are stronger.